Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience Week 15 DraftKings picks and preview at every single position. Want to let people know over the holiday season that they can tune into some upcoming golf info. Feinberg and I will be sitting down giving you our top 10 players to watch that we're excited about for 2017, plus a preview of all four majors. And if you want to get in on the golf season early, and the golf season rules, and it is the best thing that you can do after football season in terms of playing on DraftKings, go to fantasynational.com, get yourself a subscription. It's super easy to use, and it is the only piece of info you will need, the only sub you need, because it has everything that you need. It has a lineup generator. It has a simulation, course history, how the course breaks down, all of the rolling stats. It's awesome. Plus, there's something else that you need to do, at least up until December 18th. You can vote for the 2017 Custy Awards for the most cursed things of 2017. So let me bring in Mike Leone from DailyRoto.com and ask you, Mike, have you voted for the Custies?
I haven't voted yet. I've perused through a little bit, but I need to make my final votes.
It's tough. There's a lot of good options.
It's just mind-boggling how many possibilities there are. It's statistically improbable for the Ander curse to not be real.
Well, the more he refuses to believe its existence, the more powerful it becomes.
Yeah, it's an exponential effect.
Now, did you see you got your question to Tim last week made Cuss Corner?
I need to watch that. I'm pumped for it. The Christmas lights one, the electronic Christmas lights. I knew he would hate that. I literally would see those and I would just think of him without him having even discussed it or anything. I was like, Tim needs to talk about this. He needs to tackle this issue.
The best is he hates the projectors, yet he is the most useless handyman in the world. Like, he could never hang his own lights.
I had help from my parents, I have to admit. Millennial needing help from his dad to hang lights. But I do have real lights, not projected lights. I don't really like the projected lights, but I did see some the other day that looked like snow falling, that looked kind of cool and was better than just trying to imitate actual lights.
Yeah, see, I can get on board with that. Let everyone know where they can subscribe on Daily Roto for when football ends, because I know you guys have a trial run for NBA coming up.
Yeah, we don't have the package announced quite yet, but check back next week sometime and we'll have it up for the Christmas free trial, which we run every year from December 25th through New Year's Day. And that's going to give you access to everything in our NBA package: podcasts, lineup alerts, cliff notes, and most importantly, the projections. I think we have some of the best projections in the industry. They're customizable. If you think, oh, this guy's going to play a few more minutes, you can plug in the minutes you think he's going to play, and boom, the projection automatically updates. So it's a really great way to transition to NBA season. NFL season's done. If you're not a golf fan, or if you just want to play golf and something else, with golf being once a week, NBA is a great sport to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always intimidated by NBA because I don't follow it night to night. It's the same thing that happens to me with baseball, where if I'm not paying attention to something all the time, I feel relatively intimidated by going in and playing some of these tournaments against people that are following this every night. It seems like the same people do really well at NBA all the time, but every time that I use the Daily Roto package, I tend to win. It's weirdly, MMA and basketball are like my two highest ROI sports, and they're the ones I just kind of listen to other people on. So it just shows you how terrible my advice is.
Yeah, it is definitely a hard sport to just pick up randomly. So I think the free trial being a whole week really helps get you acclimated to everything that goes into NBA. You do have to be prepared to be at your computer through lineup lock is one of the drawbacks of NBA, but it's also one way to create an edge over other users who aren't doing the same thing, because news is pretty crazy in NBA, but we break it down for you. We update the projections too throughout the day as news break right up until lineup lock. So that's a feature that our customers have found very beneficial.
All right, let's get into running backs for week number 15. You go to the top, you see Le'Veon Bell sitting there. He's above $9,000. His market share has been through the roof. He's playing the Patriots in what projects to be a super high-scoring game. Then you look at the next four, all above $8,000. You have Alvin Kamara in second at $86, Shady, Todd Gurley, and then that awful Mark Ingram at $8,200. Do you think it is necessary to pay up for running backs this week?
I don't think you have to this week. They all seem priced pretty appropriately to me. If I were to pay up for one, though, it'd be Le'Veon Bell. His targets have been crazy recently. 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's seen double-digit targets. And I think the big question mark for him is, do those targets dip down a little bit with Juju Smith-Schuster returning from suspension? He missed one of those games in that span as well due to injury. And if you have him around an 18% market share target, which we do right now in our customizable projections, he's an okay play. If you put him back up around 22%, he's a really good play. So, but this game in general looks like it's going to be a shootout with New England. We're projecting both offenses to run an above average amount of plays by a few plays. So the most projected overall plays in this game, New England's rush defense, I think they've dropped to last in rush defense DVOA. So really good matchup for Bell. For me, it comes down to whether I'm going to pay up for him or his teammate Antonio Brown at wide receiver. I think it's very close between the two. My early lean is to go with Antonio Brown.
Yeah, for me, it's Antonio Brown as well, especially for cash games, because I think you can pay down at running back and either tread water or find some good value. And we'll get to the value guys in a second. But for tournament play, do you think it is a wise stack to end up going Brown, Bell, and Ben and just hope that's where all the scoring is?
Yeah, I think you can absolutely do that in this one, and then bring it back with Chris Hogan or one of the more affordable options for New England. And the one reason I think that's viable, and I'll look at my notes here for a second, but if you look at the pass percentages for Pittsburgh the last 4 weeks, 80%, 65%, 65%, and 68%. They're throwing the ball a ton. And against New England, a team where they're not going to blow them out, it could be back and forth shootout. I don't see any reason for that pass percentage to dip, lower. So if you've got two guys that could combine for 55, 60% of the team's targets in a shootout, those guys can absolutely get to value together, especially, DK, you've got the full point per reception scoring. You've got the 100-yard bonuses. So you don't need every single touchdown in your lineup. You can get big performances without getting 2-3 touchdown games from every single guy.
Well, what about on the comeback? You mentioned Chris Hogan. I would bet that he's going to be supremely unpopular after his performance on Monday night, not really doing anything. But again, this is the first time he played in 4 weeks, and that entire offense looked really bad. What about one of the running backs? You have Rex Burkhead. He comes in at $6,400. Dion Lewis is $5,400. Now, it seems like more volume will end up going to Lewis because he's handling a lot of the carries, and he actually did get involved in the passing game on Monday night for the first time in a while, 5 for 50, but it just seems like if you're playing upside, especially for tournaments, Burkhead would probably be the option for me because I feel like he's the one that has the most touchdown potential of anyone on that team.
It's hard for me because the macro view I take it usually is just take the cheaper one who's going to be less popular because of some of the uncertainty. They're both getting touches in a variety of ways. But when I look at it more micro, I'm with you on Burkhead. They've really utilized him by the goal line the last few weeks, made a very conscious effort to get him the ball inside the 5-yard line in the passing game on the ground. So Burkhead does seem to have the higher upside. And if you get into more of a back and forth game, I know Lewis was involved in the passing game, but you're still expecting more involvement as a receiver out of Burkhead.
The only problem area that comes into it is that James White's snaps have been increasing the past 2 weeks. He led them 2 weeks ago. He ended up scoring the goal line touchdown on a pass play on Monday night. Do you worry that there's the James White influence, that he just might hurt the bottom line too much from both these guys?
I do worry about that. I also worry about Hogan being healthier. You've got Gronk returning from suspension. So I do believe as a whole, this running back group's priced a little expensive, especially the combined prices between Burkhead and Dion Lewis. It's not, exorbitant, but I do think that if they're going to be popular, I would only play them as part of a game stack. I'm not really interested in them as one-off plays with the increase in price tag and with more bodies being there for New England.
All right, so just back to the top for a second. Alvin Kamara may or may not play. It's looking like he's going to play with a concussion. Let's say he sits. I would never play Mark Ingram, but would you play Mark Ingram?
If Kamara sits, Ingram, I think, would be a cash game lock. I really do. You're 16-point favorites. You've got the highest team total by far on the slate. It's just a smash spot against the Jets. And the volume for Ingram, he's an 8K-ish type true talent or true, opportunity talent, however you want to break it down. I know you won't call it talent, but he should be an 8K player with a split with a guy who's more expensive. And you take away that more expensive guy, I mean, it's nuts to say, but he's a $9,500 type player in that situation, in my opinion, because you're gonna get him up to 18% market share of targets. I'm just spitballing there, but he's already receiving targets. He's already receiving a good amount of goal line carries. They run so much that I think he'd be a cash game lock if Kamara's out.
All right, well, let's say Kamara plays. Do you have interest in either one of them?
I think I'm more interested in Kamara just because
He's
the
better.
big play potential and more targets. And they're both pretty expensive. It's a really good spot. I think their production is going to be really high for both of them. It's just they are pretty expensive. And I've got Kamara right now. I've got Kamara, Gurley, Le'Veon Bell all rating pretty similar with point per dollar production. With again, Bell, I think our projection might be a little bit conservative because you could see the more targets based on the recent performance. But I got them all priced pretty appropriately, but the best of the expensive plays, clearly ahead of Mark Ingram.
All right, well, the last guy you touched on there, Todd Gurley, I don't think that he's going to be super popular this week. People are going to look back. The last time that the Rams played Seattle, the Rams went away from him. He didn't have that great of a game. But I feel like no matter what the score is, what the situation is, at this point in the season, that Todd Gurley is going to be a lock for 20-plus touches. He gets every single goal line carry. Could this be a spot to go on to Gurley thinking he's going to be like 7% owned in something like the Millionaire Maker and just really hope he just busts out this game?
If Gurley's 7% owned, you absolutely want an overweight position. There's very few running backs that have this profile that you mentioned where it doesn't matter what the game script is, what the scenario is. He's going to see a healthy amount of targets, around a 17% market share. So he's going to dominate the running back carries. I mean, pretty much nobody else gets a running back carry. They mix in Tavon Austin once in a while. Malcolm Brown, he doesn't really give Gurley a breather, maybe one or two a game, or if it's a huge blowout. This game is probably not a blowout. So if you're paying up, there's few guys with just massive upside week to week, regardless of matchup. And Gurley, Le'Veon Bell are two of those backs just because of the well-rounded volume.
So Shady is probably on the bottom of that totem pole then?
Yeah, the issue with him is the Bills are kind of dumb. You've got Travaris Cadet they've been mixing in. You've got Mike Tolbert, who's back now. So if Cadet steals some targets, they both steal some carries between the 20s, and then Tolbert steals some goal line touches, all of a sudden you just don't have this volume workload that you have for everyone else. Shady's a really good player, and he's got the upside because of his talent, but he's much more fragile than these other top backs.
So I look between this like $8,000 and $6,000 range, and you have names like Fournette, Jamal Williams, Rex Burkhead, Christian McCaffrey. I don't really want a part of any of these guys, weirdly enough, unless you think that the return of Aaron Rodgers for Jamal Williams is really going to up his potential. But I'm not even certain that Aaron Rodgers being back is better for Jamal Williams. I think the volume that he was seeing and his work in the passing game was just a product of Brett Hundley not being very good. I think with Aaron Rodgers back, Jordy Nelson all of a sudden is a viable option. Randall Cobb might start doing things. Lance Kendricks could get on the board. That the touchdown potential under Aaron Rodgers is higher because the scoring will be higher for Jamal Williams. I just don't know if he's going to see that same sort of volume.
Yeah, initially my take was that it's a net even, where he loses some volume. He brings in some upside in terms of efficiency and touchdown upside. But the more I think about it and the way you broke it down, I do think it's probably a net negative. And the other aspect to this, too, is you've got Aaron Jones lurking there. And what he did last week, he didn't contribute a whole bunch, but I think slowly each week you're going to see him cut into the workload just enough. And any 1 week he could take a third of the carries, a third of the running back targets. And when you already got a projection in terms of less running back volume because of Aaron Rodgers' presence, that's going to be an issue. So I'm selling on Jamal Williams. I don't think you're into him at all. I don't like this range at all. The only guy I'm maybe interested in tournaments is actually the other side of the Green Bay game, and Christian McCaffrey, just because his receiving upside so high that he's the type of guy that I don't mind, buying low. I don't want to play him when he's 7,200, even if the recent performances look good. I want to play him at 6K, even if the recent performances don't look that good. But even him, I'm not in love with, but he's the one that I'm most prone to use in tournaments of this group.
The big problem with Christian McCaffrey is that you're really relying on him to break a big one to score a touchdown, because we've just seen the reemergence of Jonathan Stewart in the red zone, and Cam Newton's always going to call his own number. Now that Greg Olsen is a little bit healthier, he might get worked back in too. I feel like he always has a capped upside, even though the floor is always going to be good because of the volume of targets and the receptions that he brings. If he doesn't break a big one, he kind of sinks you. And this really brings us to the big point here. Kenyon Drake at 5,800 is probably the play of the week if Damian Williams sits.
Yeah, according to 4for4.com, their schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game metric, the Bills have allowed the most per game to the running back position. And the matchup's really nice, and that's a bonus, but really this is more about the volume with Damian Williams out. Drake's averaged 24 carries per game the last 2 games. He's averaged 4 catches per game the last 2 games. Only a 2-game sample, but there's just no one else there to receive this workload. And Drake, as someone that people were concerned about taking on this workload, I mean, he's proven people wrong. He's looked really, really good in these last 2 games. No reason for that volume to change. And really this week, outside of him, a lot of the values, in my opinion, are pretty clustered. The pricing looks pretty good on DK, and he's the one clear outlier at the position.
Yeah, I guess the only other one in terms of volume that could kind of pop up, if Joe Mixon sits, Gio Bernard again, even though he's $2,200 more expensive this week than when he was a lock last week at $3,100. He's someone that could get 20 touches against the Vikings. The problem is it's against the Vikings.
Yeah, and it's a Cincinnati offense, too, that they don't run a lot of plays as an offense. And Minnesota doesn't allow a lot of plays because they control the ball. They're a pretty good team. And all of a sudden, even though the market share carries is good, he's going to get the running back targets. When you add up all that volume, it's not an insane amount of volume. It's an insane amount of volume if you're a 3K back. If you're a mid-5s back and you're in a tough matchup from an efficiency standpoint on top of it, I'm selling. I think he's outside the top 10 running back values on the week, even if Mixon is out.
All right, Lamar Miller, Carlos Hyde, they're both right there. Alex Collins is right there as well. Do you have interest in any of those 3? I just worry about Collins, and people have just been giving me heat about it. I rank Collins 20th or 21st in my running back rankings for this week, and it's not so much that I don't believe in his talent. I do, and I get that they're favorites, but like Buck Allen's coming in near the goal line and stealing touchdowns. Danny Woodhead is still getting run. Like, he has to be so ultra efficient and really good every single week. Now, the price is super fair, but I just worry that could go so far the other way that he doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I'm with you in the sense that for him to do well, he needs to run well in terms of efficiency, and he has been. But this Cleveland rush defense is pretty good. People don't realize you're going to get inflated volume against Cleveland just because of game script reasons. But as you said, you're sharing a little bit with some other guys there, and Javorius Allen by the goal line. I could easily see Collins having a fine day, getting to 100 yards and a touchdown. Everyone's like, that was obvious, but he could also run for 60 yards and no touchdowns and have very little in the passing game, and all of a sudden it's a big flop.
The one right below him, I think people are very interested in. It's Jay Ajayi at $5,000, and the reasoning behind it was, hey, Jay Ajayi finally led all Philadelphia running backs in terms of snaps a week ago. He had over 50%. He was like 50.8%. But still, that's a 4-way kind of mashup there with Kenyon Barner, with Corey Clement, with LeGarrette Blount. There's no guarantee that he's going to lead this backfield. And then people say, hey, they're playing the Giants. You can run on the Giants pretty easily. That is very true. However, with Nick Foles, maybe they lean on the run a little bit more, and this is where Ajayi really gets going. I would be willing to let everyone else have Jay Ajayi and just kind of go with the fact that he's not going to hit all the upside because there are too many mouths to feed.
Yeah, we're on the same page with this one. Even if you project him a bit better in terms of volume, there's just too many guys there. LeGarrette Blount, Corey Clement there. It's just difficult, and they score a high percentage of their touchdowns through the air. I think even with Nick Foles in the fold, that's probably going to be the case, just given the way the play calling works there for Philadelphia. You just need a lot to go right here, and I'm not willing to bet on that. I'd rather drop down a couple $100. You've got Samaje Perine for Washington, who I know got banged up a little bit last week but was able to return to the game. there's just nobody else there for Washington. Byron Marshall got hurt. He's on IR. I know they've signed Capri Bibbs. They've got LaShawn Daniels. But I think with Marshall as the key pass catching back now injured, who had replaced Chris Thompson to an extent, you're going to see P. Ryan on the field a ton. He's seen 4, 3, and 4 targets the past 3 weeks. I think that's the floor on his targets, with him now having to stay in some other situations where the receiving back may have come in. It's a favorable game script projection, 4.5-point favorites. Decent team total for Washington. I'm buying a lot here.
Yeah, and the one thing, because you can say that, hey, maybe Daniels comes in to replace Marshall, maybe Capri Bibbs comes in to replace Marshall, but if you look at their profiles from college, they weren't pass-catching running backs. They're kind of like P. Ryan. So what would be the point of using them?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Daniels, you're not worried at all filling that role, and you already saw the volume for P. Ryan. He was someone I liked last week, too, as a contrarian play. It didn't work out, but the volume's there. He's going to get the goal line touches. You just need the game to go a certain way, and if it goes that certain way, this could be an absolute smash play.
So I look at the $5,000 and below level, and I have 4 guys to kind of talk about his values, whether it's cash game and some are just tournament plays only. But P. Ryan was one of them at $4,800. DeMarco Murray is one of them at $4,700. Then down at $4,000, you have 2 guys, Kerwin Williams, my guy, probably not yours, $4,000, and then Mike Davis, who's dealing with the ribs, but could be in a really good spot against a Rams defense that isn't great against the run anyway, but they're kind of banged up in the secondary as well, so it just might be easier to move the ball and extend drives against them in general this week.
Yeah, the Rams defense is 19th in DVOA against the run, so I think that's a good spot for Mike Davis, who's really just started to dominate the carries for Seattle. Now, this is a spot that hasn't seen much production, no matter who's been there all season long. You still got J.D. McKissick taking a lot of work in the passing game, but at least in terms of the rush attempts and a little bit in terms of targets, it's clearly going to be Mike Davis there. He's not splitting that role like Rawls and Lacey were splitting that role at one point. So at 4K, and he's been better than those guys too. So I like him at 4K. I don't know if it's a massive ceiling, but type of guy that can get you low to mid-teens and have pretty good return on investment. Guy I like a lot for tournaments is DeMarco Murray this game against San Francisco, where in the price tags are just good at both him and Henry sub 5K. And right now for us, Murray projects as a break-even type play, and that's with splitting that touchdown projection up, because it's tough to project who's going to score the touchdown, but in reality, in application, they can't split a touchdown. So if Murray scores a touchdown, he's going to be a really good play. If he doesn't, not such a good play, but that's why it's a tournament option. He receives more volume in the passing game, which is why I think he's a better option than Henry, even though Henry seems to have found the end zone more lately.
Any interest in the Vikings running backs against Cincinnati? We just saw Jordan Howard had a lot of success. Could Latavius Murray be the next one up?
Yeah, I like Murray for tournaments just because he's gotten a ton of goal line touches the last 4 or 5 weeks or so, and this Bengals defense is just banged up. You mentioned what Jordan Howard did. I was a little ticked at myself for not having more exposure to Howard. He didn't rate well, but just a slew of injuries last week for the Bengals, and there's still some of them that are carrying over to this week that I can see it. It's tough. You know, it's just tough with a split backfield. They're both around 5K that neither of them project great, but I could see either of them in tournaments. But Murray is the one that intrigues me more. I think just based on this matchup, I want the goal line rusher more than I want the pass catcher.
Yeah, I'm with you. So in cash games, let's say, would you have a problem if you were paying up in other positions to go Drake and let's say P. Ryan and cash, or could you go in tournament play Murray and Drake in that spot and just overload at other positions?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to approach it. It's one of the few weeks I said where we don't have a top back in terms of projected value that looks like an obvious play. Usually our top 3 backs, even after taking into account salary in terms of value, are Gurley, Bell, like two or 4 of the same guys every week, just because the volume is so good. But based on the pricing and the specific matchups this week, it's not the case. So I really don't mind at all going the route that you mentioned. We're too similar this week, right? It's scaring me. I feel like we're never on the same page quite to the extent that we are so far at running back.
But we should have got Davis back on. Then he would have been like,
I know.
I would just 1 second. I'll try to do Davis's play here. Let me just scroll it running back. Oh, you got to play CJ Ham this week. He's gonna get all the touchdowns.
Feel like Davis won't watch this.
Yeah, I know. Davis never watches. We can make as much fun of Davis as we want. Wide receivers. Antonio
Let's
Brown's
go.
number one. I love Antonio Brown this week, just especially compared to the other top options. I know he's by far the most expensive. He's $9,100. DeAndre Hopkins is $7,700. But DeAndre Hopkins, I think his talent can overcome the matchup against Jacksonville, but it's not something I'd want to approach in cash games. And same as AJ Green. Like, AJ Green's down at $6,500 against Minnesota. And, I mean, you can get Xavier Rhodes. We saw Devin Funchess get off of him for one snap last week, and boom, he scores a touchdown. And the volume for AJ Green's always going to be there, but I think just lock it in. Antonio Brown is the guy this week.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned again the huge pass percentages for Pittsburgh the last few weeks. We've got a high play projection for them too. So simple math, high pass percentage projection, high play projection, a lot of pass attempts. And Antonio Brown, someone who's always going to see a market share targets in 30+%, only a handful of guys that you can really say that about, and a game that should be high scoring. I like him a ton. Again, I'm paying up for one of Bell or Brown on this week. My early lean is for Brown, but you could make the case for any of them. I do like AJ Green, though. I know it's a tough matchup against Xavier Rhodes, but that price tag, I just get suckered in. I see 6,500, and I said the only handful of guys over a 30% market share targets. The last several weeks, AJ Green's been, I think, the last 4 weeks at 37%, which is astronomical. And I wouldn't project that to continue, but even anywhere in the low 30s, even if the matchup against a corner is really tough. Xavier Rhodes is a very good corner, but things happen. There's volatility here. And AJ Green, let's not forget, he is an elite talent still.
So if you have AJ Green and you have DeAndre Hopkins in two bad matchups, people will probably gravitate away from them. Do you think that they make good pivot plays and contrarian plays in tournaments? Because the one thing that it was either you or Drew who hammered this into my head a long time ago, that there's a big difference between being contrarian and being stupid. And being contrarian with elite level talent is always a better way to go, even if they have the bad matchup. It could be lighting your money on fire, but you could get access to a 6% DeAndre Hopkins, and boom, he just explodes in this game.
Yeah, elite level talent and elite level volume too. So I do see that in tournaments. I'm more on Green than Hopkins because the price is $1,200 cheaper. And, you've got another quarterback switch, even though Hopkins did very well with Yates in there last week. But I'm also more concerned about the matchup with Hopkins than I am for Green. But they're both bad matchups. They're both, I think, would qualify as smart contrarian plays. I'm just much more on the Green side than the Hopkins side.
Of the remaining three $7,000 receivers, you have Thielen, Michael Thomas, and Brendan Cooks. I can see the appeal of Brendan Cooks here, just because New England had such a bad game Monday night. Everyone watched it. That's embedded in people's minds. People probably go away from him. I have a feeling that Michael Thomas is going to be severely over-owned, and I don't love him in a matchup where I project the Saints just to be running the ball over and over and over. I don't think you're going to see the 10-catch day from him, so you're really banking on him to score a touchdown. But it's Thielen coming in against a banged-up Cincinnati defense, and the one thing that I really like about it is the Cincinnati defense that we're going to be seeing in Week 15 is not the Cincinnati defense that DraftKings has on the site as the fourth most difficult defense to wide receivers. It's not that team right now, and Thielen is just great every single week, and I think that people might overlook him here. I'm going to be using a lot of Adam Thielen.
And the other thing I just saw before we did this podcast is that Kyle Rudolph's in a walking boot, and if he's out, that opens up, even more targets for a guy who's getting a ton of volume, especially in the red zone. So both Thielen and Diggs, the price tags look okay. Thielen's someone that I play every week in tournaments because I think he's perpetually under-owned. He had another good game last week. I think he had a touchdown called back in addition to the touchdown that he scored. It was almost a massive week for him. He's the type of guy that can put up 160 receiving yards in a game. There's not a lot of guys that can do that. So I'm with you, and I do think Michael Thomas is a guy that if he was going to be 5%, I'd play him and hope that you get luck with the TDs, that they go passing instead of rushing. But I think given the strong week last week and the huge team total, that's likely not the case. So again, same page with you. I like Thielen. I like Stephon Diggs a lot as contrarian receiver plays. And with the running back value, I think it's a really good week to find 10 to 12 receivers to mix in that are underpriced and have huge upside, or maybe not even underpriced, but I would consider affordable this week.
So in the $6,000 level at wide receiver, Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson are both right there. Are you going to return to the Packers receivers? I mean, Adams has been great every week, but Jordy Nelson's been absolutely useless. But do you think that people will gravitate towards Nelson? They'll be like, a bit gun shy on him, or is he just a guy to play? Or do you just drop to Randall Cobb?
I'm having a tough time projecting this scenario. Initially, I thought, Jordy's going to be great because we saw his price tag as low as the low 4,000s at some point. And then I check and it's 6,300. And I do have some concerns that Jordy Nelson's downswing is more than just the lack of presence of Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers can save him because of the red zone production, but I do think we're seeing a receiver that just happens to be in his decline. I like the guy on the other side of that game, Devin Funchess.
Yeah. Oh my God, you and I are reading far too many of the same tea leaves here because I have written down as my wide receiver values right now Antonio Brown even at 9,100. Then next guy Devin Funchess, $6,600.
I mean $6,600, and for a while there, when Benjamin got traded, we were like, okay, he's going to see 30% market share targets. He's going to see all these targets. And he was like a quarter, 25% guy. And the last few weeks, he's been really high in terms of market share. They ran a little bit more the last couple weeks, which kept the overall target down. But if you look at the market share, it was really high. And against Green Bay, now hopefully Green Bay plays at a faster pace. It's more likely to be a close game back and forth with Aaron Rodgers expected to be in. And this Green Bay defense, I believe, again, by the 4-for-4 schedule adjusted points per game allowed, I think Green Bay right now has allowed the most to the wide receiver position. So just a really, really good spot for Funchess.
Yeah, I like Funchess here. I like him more than Gordon. I like him more than Doug Baldwin. I like him more than A.J. Green, Cooper Kupp, and Jordy Nelson. So that's where I'm primarily going to be going. Do you have interest in any one of the other guys there? Like we saw on Sunday night that Baltimore's defense isn't really the same without Jimmy Smith. Can Josh Gordon just take full advantage of that, or is Kaiser too shitty?
I hate to cop out, but this is another one where it depends where you peg the ownership on Josh Gordon because he's a guy that you can play in tournaments every single week. There's a couple of guys like that.
Like Tyreek Hill?
Tyreek Hill, Alshon Jeffrey's one that I love, top 5 in air yards. I think people stay away from him because of the quarterback change, but another good matchup against the Giants. But these guys that receive this elite level opportunity with these high air yards and plays that might be, not plays that you're going to consistently hit, but when you do hit, they're worth a ton of points. And the volume is there just for massive games. And as we talked about with Smart Contrarian, you want the talent, you want the volume. So it just comes down to this is going to be a volatile position. How much ownership are these guys going to carry? If these guys are sub 10%, you're absolutely buying. If these guys are 15% or above, look elsewhere. Look for the guys that are better projected per dollar plays because I don't think these guys are cash game plays.
One guy that I'm actually staying away from this week, and I've been just riding every single week. Like when I actually went 100% fade on Josh Gordon last week, and I moved most of my shares onto Marquise Goodwin. He's only $6,000. He's getting all the volume. Jimmy G looks great. On paper, this looks like a great matchup, but Logan Ryan has taken away the wide receiver one of the opposing team in 3 straight weeks now. And I think talent-wise, Marquise Goodwin's no Larry Fitzgerald. Let's just leave it at that. Is the volume good enough to overcome here, or do you think that the Niners find an easier path to getting to Tennessee?
It's similar to the Gordon situation where I think you're going to see a lot of air yards for Marquise Goodwin because he's someone who's always had a high ADOT. You're going to take downfield shots with him, but with Jimmy G in the last 2 games, the overall market share targets has been there. That's always intriguing from a tournament perspective, but when you break down Goodwin's talent, as you said, he's no Larry Fitzgerald. To pay $6K for Marquise Goodwin. And again, it's just a 2-game sample with Garoppolo. So it's not like he has this solidified role where we're going to see all of these targets. And in a tough individual corner matchup, I do think I'm more on the fade side of things because people are going to keep going back to it, going to get allured by that combination of big play upside and increasing overall targets. But I do think there's enough uncertainty here. The skill set isn't that strong that I'd rather be on the fade side. But again, a lot of these guys, it comes down to projected ownership. If you're going to give me 3% Goodwin, yeah, I'm going to play him, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
So in the $5,000 area, Robert Woods makes his return. Do you have interest in any of the Rams receivers against the beat-up Seattle secondary?
I don't. It's a situation where the price tags are up a little bit on Kupp, on Sammy Watkins because of the production without Woods. Then you bring Woods back, and you don't know if he steps into this huge role or not. And I'm just looking elsewhere this week.
Robbie Anderson likely to draw Marshawn Lattimore. When we saw Bryce Petty play in the preseason in the final 4 games last year, it was just, hey, I have a play. Let's throw it to Robbie Anderson. And Robbie Anderson's actually pretty good, as it turns out, and especially can get downfield. But do you think this matchup is too much to overcome? Because I might think it is.
So the interesting part is you're going to expect New York to be down in this game and probably down early. And how many pass attempts do they run? We saw last week when Petty came in, they weren't even trying in that game. They were still running the ball. Are they going to be conservative when they're down this week? Are they even going to run a lot of plays with New Orleans running the clock? If you think that's the type of game that plays out, then you're absolutely fading Rob Anderson against Marshawn Lattimore. Now, if you think that with a full week of practice, that when the Jets get down big, that they're just going to air it out and actually try and come back and be able to run a lot of plays and a lot of pass attempts. You're looking at 2 receivers for the Jets that are both over 30% market share targets the last 3 to 4 weeks. And in that scenario, I think they're both somewhat appealing, but it's actually Jermaine Kearse that I would look at just because you're getting a lot of volume. You've got some big play upside, and he's just way cheaper. And while he's going to have a tough wide receiver cornerback matchup himself, he doesn't have to deal with Marshawn Lattimore.
He doesn't, and that I think those savings are where it comes in for me, and that he might actually run shorter A-dot routes, making the completions a little bit better, because New Orleans is going to bring the heat against the Jets. They have a very poor offensive line. Like Petty's not going to have time to stand back in the pocket and go through his progressions and chuck it. He might have to turn around, see who's standing there, and throw it to that guy.
Yeah, and speaking of like low A-dot guys, there are some guys that I think are interesting for cash games with Jamison Crowder, Sterling Shepard, these slot type guys that can rack up catches. I know Shepard was terrible last week. Someone that we were at Daily Roto, we were on him a lot at the beginning of the week. Luckily, we backed off a little bit, but we still liked him more than we probably should have. The good news for Shepard is hopefully he's healthier this week and we see some more full practices out of him, whereas last week it was just limited practice. And two, he still played a ton. He was on the field for around 95% of the team snaps last week. So he's someone in this Giants offense who can rack up targets like crazy, just given how things go and just given the lack of competition for touches there.
Yeah, I like Shepard as a contrarian play for tournaments. Obviously, I wouldn't go for him in cash just because the floor isn't really there. But I still think that he can get back to that double-digit target with Eli back under center in this matchup. But I like all the other guys around him. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster is kind of tough, probably a tournament play only. But right above Shepard, right below Shepard, I love D.D. Westbrook this week at $5,100. I just keep playing D.D. every week. Siege sold me on him like 4 weeks ago, so I've just been running him through. And he's been great almost every single week. He's been a profitable player on DraftKings at his price point every single week, and now he's in a great spot against Houston. And then if you look one up, I know we talked about DeMarco Murray, we talked about Derrick Henry, we're going to talk about Marcus Mariota in a second, but the Niners stink on defense, and Rashard Matthews back to full health now could be in a really terrific spot.
The one on D.D. Westbrook, I saw Scott Fish tweet something out about how fast receivers have done in this matchup.
Well, he's super fast.
Yeah, they've smoked this matchup, and he is super fast. So that's definitely, in addition to the fact that I believe he's led the team in targets since he's joined the team after being hurt at the beginning of the season. It's an enticing combination, but the price tag's going up, the ownership's going up. I think I'm going to fade DD. I don't hate it as a play by any means. Just I think he's going to be a little bit over-owned there.
I don't know, because I think it depends on what people do at receiver. So let's say I find your typical player will want to pay up for at least a running back, and whether that's all the way up to Bell or whether if it's Todd Gurley or whether it's Mark Ingram, whatever. So you're spending $8,000 your cap right there. Someone's going to pay up for a receiver, potentially 2 this week, and Antonio Brown is the most likely candidate of that, and he's $9,100. That I just feel like this entire range goes under-owned because it's hard to make that combination work within your salary cap if you double pay up at positions.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how people end up constructing rosters, as you said. And I hate to be a broken record, but ownership's going to be so important this week because I feel like there are a lot of receivers, like more receivers than we've had, especially considering the fact that it's only an 11-game slate. But we've got a bunch of receivers with upside that are affordable. For a lot of weeks on DraftKings, I felt like there were these 6,500, 7K receivers that I liked, 6,500, 7,500. And then after that, I was going cheap. Whereas this week, there are more guys in the 5,000s. Mentioned Diggs. One guy I'm pretty sure won't come with ownership. We hit on it with the Pittsburgh New England stack a bit, but Chris Hogan intrigues me. Before he got hurt, he was on the same target per game pace as Brandon Cooks. He was used in the red zone more than Brandon Cooks, and now he's $1,600 cheaper in a game that could be a shootout. Hoping that he's fully healthy, and there's no way this New England offense is going to look as bad as they did last week.
I have no really strong leans on anyone under $5,000 except for Jermaine Kearse and actually Ryan Grant at $3,500. I think that Patrick Peterson likely takes out Josh Docks and everyone's going to go on to Crowder, but I think it's Ryan Grant he's better. And I think that Kirk Cousins can hit him downfield a little bit, and we know how wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3s have exploited the Cardinals, especially on the road so far this season. So I like Ryan Grant as a tournament flyer.
Yeah, a couple of tournament flyers that I'm liking cheap. Homer pick right now, but Deontay Thompson for the Bills. It's a really good matchup against a poor Miami pass defense, despite how they did last week against New England. Miami's going to be on the road this week. And Tyrod Taylor looks like he's going to suit up, which I think is better for Deontay Thompson. He's going to take more downfield shots. And if Calvin Benjamin's out for this game, you've got Jordan Matthews on IR. I just don't know where else they're going to go. And you're going to argue that they're going to have a super run-heavy approach, but at $3,100, I think that is worth a flyer in tournaments.
Any other ones?
Roger Lewis a little bit.
See, I just like Ryan Grant's touchdown upside more than those guys.
I gotta look into Grant a little bit more. I might not, in our initial run of projections, it's tough with those wide receiver cornerback matchups. They get so extreme that you're actually shifting targets around in a meaningful way. But one against Patrick Peterson might be where, shifting off Doxson and moving some more to Grant. So I do have to look at that. But initial run, I really didn't have him in there. There was one more cheap guy. JJ Nelson is just like a downfield guy that's getting some targets, but that one's a little bit soft.
The final two guys at receiver I did want to bring up because I'm just sort of intrigued by them, and I they're probably going to be awful, but I look at them. One is Nelson Aguilar with Nick Foles. It's just he got such a discount on his pricing because they're factoring Foles into the situation. He's $4,400. Like, who's to say that Nick Foles doesn't love throwing to Nelson Aguilar? And the other one at $4,100 is Tyler Lockett. We've already kind of mentioned that the Rams secondary is completely beat up right now. He's a downfield presence. He's scored in 2 straight weeks after not scoring the entire season. I just feel like those are cheap guys with potential upside.
Yeah, of those two, I'm definitely more interested in the Aguilar one. Lockett, I think you've got on the touchdowns. You've run into some pretty good variance with him, whereas Aguilar has different ways that he can achieve his upside. Like you said, he could be targeted a lot more. We've seen him have a decent percentage of the team's receiving touchdowns on the year. So I'm more into Aguilar. I probably won't have any Lockett this week.
All right, let's move to quarterbacks. Brady, Wilson, and Wentz, who's on IR, are your above $7,000 crowd. I found I'm just bad at picking quarterbacks in general, but I found this week extremely difficult, and I keep coming to the same guy over and over again. It's Cam Newton. Cam Newton, $6,400. He's playing Green Bay. Why not? Like, why isn't that the best play?
I think it is.
What? Really? We're on the same page with this? We're going to have such a bad week.
I know. This is just going to be a dumpster. In the history of this show, we've probably agreed more in this show double any other individual show.
I'm going to say more than the other shows combined.
Yeah, but quite possibly. I haven't even made fun of you for a cheap pass-catching running back this week, so I don't even know if the show counts. But Newton's rush attempts have been up over the latter half of the season where they were just kind of like, okay, let's let Cam be Cam, do his thing. He's looking healthy there. You've got Greg Olsen back, which I know he left and came back last week, but he seems like he's okay. And that just helps the overall offense. Even if Olsen himself's not going to do a whole ton, it takes some attention from the defense. And it could be more of a back and forth game with Rodgers there. That price tag just feels light. I could never argue against playing Russell Wilson in cash games. I don't know if I want to go that high, but he just contributes such a high percentage of the team's touchdowns. I mean, they have thrown 88% of their offensive touchdowns have been through the air, second most in the entire NFL. And of the rushing touchdowns, he still has a decent share of those. So the touchdown equity in Russell Wilson is higher than any other quarterback, and it makes him a viable cash game option week in and week out.
So the other guy that I keep coming to, and I released a poll earlier in the week that I said, who would you rather start in week 15?
Oh, I'm scared. I'm scared we're going to agree again.
Marcus Mariota or Nick Foles? And it came back.
Nick Foles!
And it came overwhelmingly on the side of Nick Foles. And the purpose wasn't that I actually had a lineup decision like that. The purpose was to kind of gauge the market on Marcus Mariota right now. Because someone asked me, just like, they started throwing out, what about this guy? And what about this guy? Well, I can't use a super, like, people love Jimmy G right now. People are going to use Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think that's a bad test case. With Nick Foles, people are kind of wishy-washy, but they'd much rather use him than Marcus Mariota. Now, Marcus Mariota is apparently dealing with a knee injury, or he just might suck. We don't know. But in this matchup against San Francisco, the team that allows the most plays against of any team. Now, we talked about the running backs. I talked about Matthews. I'm sure we'll talk about Delaney Walker. But in tournament play, no one's going to own Marcus Mariota, and this is the perfect matchup for him when everyone is off the Titans. It could blow up in your face. He could continue to be terrible, but I do like this spot for him, and I will be using it.
I probably won't have much of Mariota. I'm just not seeing the upside right now. I know we've seen it in the past. His rookie year, I think he was on the Million Maker winning team at least twice during that season, but I'm just not seeing it. I'd rather play Nick Foles, and I don't think Nick Foles is going to be high owned. And quarterback ownership gets so spread out that, are you really creating a ton of leverage because you play Mariota at 1% instead of Nick Foles at 5%? I don't know. I don't think, that's going to tweak your if it's close, you want to take the lower owned guy, but if you don't think it's close, I don't really think it's close, you're going to go with the guy that you think's better. And I'm pretty high on Nick Foles. I think Doug Peterson there is just a really good coach, and as good as Carson Wentz is, I do think the coaching has a lot to do with that. Wentz can make some plays that obviously Nick Foles can't make, but you've got weapons here, you've got a well-coached team, and you've got another team in the Giants that inflates plays, like not as much as San Francisco, but they do inflate plays relative to the league average.
Well, the big thing that I would think about in this scenario, and why I'm using Mariota over Foles in tournaments, is that if you told me that one of them after Sunday scored 40 points, the answer is Marcus Mariota. And that's all I really care about for tournament play. Like, if they're both going to be super low owned, I do think the Foles...
Nick Foles threw 7 touchdowns once, dude.
That's great. That's great. You think if that Nick Foles production is coming, you've lost your mind. But listen, I'm willing to burn those Mariota lineups. That's why I'm going to put some stock into him. I'm saying if I play 20 lineups, which I likely will on Sunday, I'll have Mariota in 3 of them.
Yeah, I mean, a guy who can run for a 50-yard touchdown that no one's going to play, I get where you're coming from. I don't think I'd make the play. I think Tyrod Taylor, too, down there, you can make a similar case for, but homerism shining on this one. Another guy that might have an injury who has played really bad this season, just doesn't have much help around him, but is in a pretty good overall matchup and is cheap for a rushing quarterback. Sometimes for tournaments, any rushing quarterback that's cheap is worth the dice roll. But for the most part, I like Foles better than both of those guys.
Are there any other cheapos you like? Maybe Blake Bortles?
I don't really have, I hate to say this, but I have Blaine Gabbert rating not so poorly relative to the other cheap quarterbacks. Just the yards per attempt in the Arizona passing game has been surprisingly stable, or maybe not stable, but higher than I would have expected, better than the league average. And they should be down in this game. Not that scared of the Washington defense, so I think a Gabbert would be the one. And if you're assuming Adrian Peterson out, you're looking at an offense that probably has to throw a bunch. I think that's one of the big keys, is that their pass percentage on the season for Arizona is one of the highest in the league. And then you would also expect their percentage of offensive touchdowns coming through the air to be high too.
I look at Cousins. I look at Case Keenum. I'm sort of intrigued. But like I said, I'll probably go with Mariota in that spot because he'll be the lesser owned. And then I would just pay up for Cam Newton if need be. But we've kind of skirted the issue here. Aaron Rodgers, use him or no?
In tournaments, you're definitely playing him. I don't think I'm playing him in cash games, just because he's coming back to a tough spot at Carolina. But in tournaments, I will make one Green Bay stack. And when Aaron Rodgers goes off, his receivers go off. So I probably won't have a lot of Jordy Nelson at all. Probably won't have a lot of Devontae Adams, but I might make one stack where I'm going Rodgers, Adams, Jordy, bring it back with Funchess, just get it out of my system, make that one stack on let's say I'm making 6 or 8 tournament teams, somewhere in that range, make one of those. And then on my other teams, I think I'm staying away from Green Bay and just seeing how it's going to play out. But you did mention Cousins, and I'd have to double check. But right now, we've got Washington's offense in general projecting really, really well in this matchup, which brings Cousins into play as the best value once you get below Cam Newton's price tag.
And Kirk Cousins, weirdly, almost like Josh McCown, is a running back or a quarterback that will score touchdowns on the ground.
He will, and Kirk's still playing for something. I mean, I know the team's not, but Kirk needs to do all he can to make that money.
And now with Jordan Reed out, you could probably move on to Vernon Davis, although then stupid Niles Paul will catch a touchdown. Niles! He'll be terrible. Last guy, Big Ben. Cash games? Yes, no?
I think he's cash viable, but the tag's getting high. And again, this all circulates to how we think the game's going to go. We just think there's going to be so many pass attempts for Pittsburgh against the New England defense that's not that good. So I think he's one of the top 6 or so values on the week.
If you were playing a cash game and you couldn't use Russell Wilson, would you use Ben Roethlisberger or would you use Cam Newton?
I like Cam. That's a tough one. What about you?
I would use Cam. I would use Cam. Yeah. I think it's close, but I would use Cam.
I think I like Cam better overall. I do see an argument where you could say that Ben's production will be more stable than Cam's, but I don't think that argument holds enough water to take a guy that I just think projects better overall.
Tight ends, Gronk is back. He's $7,300. He's followed by Ertz, who is past concussion protocol. He's $6,000. Then Ingram, Delaney Walker. That's your $5,000 and up area. Any reason to take any of these guys? Because I have interest in all 4, but I think I like Delaney Walker the best.
I like Delaney Walker and Zach Ertz the most here. I think Ertz might end up more of a tournament play, but I'm really interested to see if people are off the Philly passing game with Wentz getting hurt, in which case I think tournament exposure to Foles, you mentioned Aguilar being cheap. I mentioned the air yards of Alshon Jeffrey, and then the stability of Zach Ertz, who's just been involved so much every single week and in the red zone. I'm on the Eagles a lot in tournaments as long as it seems like the ownership's going to cooperate throughout the week.
And then I found it extremely difficult to do anything else at tight end. Vernon Davis at $3,900 is probably a cash play if you wanted to, but I don't even feel great about that. And the other one, for tournaments at least, was David Njoku at $2,700 against Baltimore, who has really struggled against tight ends.
Yeah, Njoku's a high upside athletic type guy. I do like that for tournaments. A guy, and I struggle at the tight end position too, because even of those top 5 guys we mentioned, I don't think they're great values. They're just good raw projected total guys relative to a position that's going to be very risky. But in cash games, I don't mind just going cheap here and taking a chance with someone. I keep getting burned on Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He's only $2,900 in what looks like it's going to be a negative game script. And I'm looking at this Bills offense.
I'm going to say, Charles Clay, $3,000.
I'm just trying. I don't want to do Charles Clay, but I'm just trying to break it down. And if Kelvin Benjamin's out, and even if he plays, I'm just trying to see where the targets are going to go. And Clay and Tyrod, when they played together, have done pretty well. I think at $3K, he's probably your safest guy in cash games. Just looking at the alternatives.
That's really gross.
I know it is. It really is, but. Maybe you're going to play like Ricky Seals-Jones, who plays 25% snaps. I mean, I don't mind him in tournaments because he gets targeted so much, but I don't know if he can do that in cash games. One guy we didn't talk about, though, Jimmy Graham, $4,900. Just absurd red zone usage for him that him versus Delanie Walker, I think, is an interesting conversation.
Delanie! Oh, I was waiting for it. Thank you, Mike.
Don't!
You got it right the first time.
I don't even know. I must have been in some weird zone and it came out right without me knowing. Like Will Ferrell on Old School.
Well, I think it was the parrot effect. You heard me say it and you just copied what I said when I was pronouncing his name.
That was it. That must have been it.
All right, defenses to wrap this up. You're going to have to make a pretty hard case not to use one of the top 2 defenses, I think. The case against them is how expensive they are. The Jags are $4,500, although last time they played Houston, they sacked poor Tom Savage 10 times, and then Deshaun Watson came in the game. Now they're playing TJ Yates. It's not like the offensive line has gotten any better. So I like the Jags at 45. I love the Saints at 39 against Petty. Bad offensive line, great pass rush. And then when I drop down, the only two that are really sticking out to me in terms of like value defenses this week, Philly at 36, although that's still pretty expensive. The Rams at 28, just because of how bad. I know that the offensive line has improved in Seattle, but the pass rush for the Rams can still be very good. And even in tough matchups, they've proven they can still score touchdowns, and they're just one of those teams that gets immense pressure. You have to like that. And the other one is Washington at $2,800. Very sneaky good pass rush.
I thought we were going to disagree finally, but Washington is our top projected value. Or of the value defenses. We like paying up the defense position as well. But Washington, and when you're playing against Blaine Gabbert, I did mention he's had some success in terms of yards per attempt and whatnot, but he's someone who's still going to make some pretty egregious mistakes out there. I would say of those top two defenses that you threw out there with New Orleans and with Jacksonville, I put Baltimore right in there against Cleveland. I mean, Kaiser takes so many sacks. We saw the interception he threw in overtime. That, speaking of egregious, that was something else. That was just on a whole nother level. And Baltimore is with the top defense in terms of defensive DVOA, yep, they're number one right now. So I think they're right in there. My initial run, I had Baltimore's defense locked in, but I think Washington, I agree, is the cheap defense to go with if you're not paying up.
I was gonna save this hot take for Thursday's show, but since it's at the end of the show, maybe people can absorb it now and then call me an idiot for it. I think the Browns beat the Ravens this week.
I hope you're right.
For the Bills' sake.
Yes.
It's just something about it. Everyone in the world was on the Browns last week. Oh, they're gonna beat the Packers, and then they start off great. Josh Gordon gets involved. They're up 21-7. But then they got Cursed, and I was already talking to Tim this week, and he's like, "There's no chance the Browns could win." Bodes well for the Browns.
Oh, I like it. I mean, I can see it because it's a road game for Baltimore, and this Cleveland defense isn't. They've got some talent on the defense. On the offense, I mean, they have some talented players. They've just got a really young team and a horrible coach and, a quarterback that's going to make a lot of mistakes. So they're bad, but they're not 0-16 bad, in my opinion.
I'm trying to find Baltimore. Baltimore right now is 9th in DVOA adjusted sack rate for defensive line. So they should be able to generate a lot of pressure. They don't have a ton of sacks, though, comparatively to some of the other top defenses.
Yeah, but
how about this then?
What's Cleveland's offensive line though?
I believe Cleveland's offensive line is actually pretty good, like average good, not like they're not terrible.
I thought they were allowing a lot of sacks.
Well, that could just be
bring it up.
But that's running-ish quarterbacks that try to extend plays tend to get sacked more, regardless of their offensive line, because they scramble around the pocket so much. So Cleveland is 24th in adjusted sack rate, and they have given up a lot of sacks. Maybe you're really onto something with Baltimore there.
They seem pretty safe.
Isn't it unfortunate that we can't play Denver's defense on the main slate?
Dude, I was so pumped last week I got Denver's defense at such low ownership, which they ended up the top scoring defense overall. But honestly, Mayo, I didn't look too much outside of the main slate because I didn't want to make my mistake.
I know.
So I'm not even looking.
So right now, worst offensive lines in the league per adjusted sack rate are the Colts, the Jets, the Packers, Broncos, Bills, Texans, Redskins, and then Arizona. So Washington with the top 10. Washington with the top 10 pass rush going up against a bottom 10 offensive line. I just think that's where the value rests.
Yeah, I think so. It just comes down to, do you might not need the cap drop down. I think there's similar value to the top defenses. So I think really just whatever happens to fit.
All right. Mike Leone. Check him out on Twitter at 2 mics, 1 hat, and at dailyroto.com.
2 hats, 1 mic.
Oh, yeah, 2 hats, 1 mic. I get it wrong. I type in the number 2 and you pop up. It's really easy, actually. Tell us about Daily Roto. Football. We already did the basketball. Tell us about football for the rest of the season.
Football, yeah. I mean, try us out. We're going to do content throughout the playoffs, too, which is pretty cool. And we have customizable projections. I mentioned them for basketball. We have it for NFL, too. So you heard me mention market share targets a lot, and you're probably sick of me saying the word market share. But I say that a lot because we project each team's, number of plays run, how that's going to divvy up between pass and rush, and then you can funnel that down to individual volume by looking at market shares, and you can change those. If you think Le'Veon Bell is going to get more targets, you can up his market share of targets, and the projection immediately increases. You can do the same thing with percentage of touchdowns. You can change team totals, and that will affect the projection. So it's really cool. And if you don't want to do all that stuff, you don't have to. I don't want to intimidate people because our projections have been done pretty well this season. We're top 10 on the Fantasy Pros accuracy rankings so far this year.
All right. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter at ThePME. On Facebook, you can find a running stream of the content plus exclusive video. And on the Twitter feed, it might just get all jumbled up. That's the place where you can find everything on demand and on DKPlaybook.com. At the top of every one of my columns, it has a links template to every bit of content that I have put out for each individual week. So when you click on the cheat sheet for DraftKings on DK Playbook, you'll find links to this show, position by position, the actual overall season-long rankings, waiver wire, all that fun stuff. I'll be back on Friday to update everyone on the chalk, well, at least what we're projecting at least, for the DraftKings Millionaire Maker slate. And don't miss Thursday with Feinberg, with Tim. We're making picks for the games. Probably less informative than this show, but, equally as fun for the people out there. And you have to go back and watch that Cuss Corner, which you inspired.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do right now.
See, perfect. So, great way to kill an afternoon. That's how I would describe the Pat Mayo experience. You need to kill some time, fire it up.
Hopefully Drew's not watching because, I probably should be tweaking projections, but I think I need to fire. You know what? Maybe I should probably work on the projections while I listen, and maybe I can get some Andercurse information.
I mean, that's the most valuable part of the Thursday show, to realize who and who is not Andercursed.
It's real. It's real, folks. You gotta believe.
It's very, very real. You can subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience video version on the DraftKings YouTube page and on the DK Live app, which is top-notch. Everyone should really go get that. Whether you're on Apple or Android, it works really well, completely up to date. If you're not around watching the games, it's the best play-by-play app I've seen anywhere. It's what I use and is pretty legit up to date. It's like 10-second delay from real time, which is awesome. And plus, it has all the best stats that you can use, too. Also, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio versions on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Podomatic, iTunes, all those ones. If you know where to download podcasts, you can get the Pat Mayo Experience for free, uncut, uncensored, always. Plus on demand. I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck in Week 15. I'll see you next time.